The Constitutional Court in Angola has rejected opposition party UNITA's claim seeking to annul the results of last month's general election. UNITA filed a complaint after the victory of the governing party MPLA. The opposition alleged that a parallel vote count showed huge and unacceptable differences from those published by the electoral body. Now, the court has ruled that UNITA's complaint did not meet the requirements to allow the legal body to annul the results. The judges say the opposition party used a procedure reserved for situations in which there are no other means intended to safeguard the useful effect of the alleged rights. According to the Angolan electoral body, MPLA got 51% of the vote and UNITA managed to get 48% in the tight contest. Let's speak now to Marisa Lourenço. She handles political and economic risk in Africa with a special focus on Angola, Mozambique, South Africa, Zambia and Zimbabwe. She speaks to us now. Very good evening to you. Thank you so much for speaking to us, Marisa. Just if you can just explain to us in layman's terms what you understand by the court reading.
Good evening, and thanks so much for having me. So yes, effectively the court reading I think came as quite not really a surprise, but definitely a disappointment, because it didn't effectively rule on whether or not the vote count was fair, but it effectively just said that, as you mentioned already, UNITA has not exhausted all legal avenues. And I think this is because essentially UNITA has also approached the National Electoral Commission and it's asked it to release the ballot papers to show how it got to its final tally. And essentially the Constitutional Court was saying, it can't really interfere in that. And it's really kind of a non-answer, which I think has led to a fair amount of dissatisfaction in Angolan society.
And this is what I just really can't, perhaps it's the legalese of it all. The court saying that the opposition party used a procedure reserved for situations in which there are no other means intended to safeguard the useful effect of the alleged rights. In English, plain simple English, what does that mean?
So effectively what the Constitutional Court was saying is that UNITA has also approached the National Electoral Commission and it's asked them to actually show those ballot papers and show how it got to the final numbers. And the Constitutional Court is saying that, UNITA still needs to engage further with the National Electoral Commission, that effectively it hasn't exhausted all the options, all the legal options it has. So essentially, in any country, the Constitutional Court should be, once you've gone through every other avenue, once you've gone through the National Electoral Commission, perhaps once you've gone through lower courts, before you approach the Constitutional Court. It's effectively telling UNITA that, you've got other complaints going on. It's far too soon for us to come into the picture, and actually we're going to dismiss the injunction completely and we're not going to consider it anymore.
So what UNITA is saying is that the results that they had in their possession and what the official polling station records show don't tally. But we know that political party agents are supposed to sign off on these election results coming out of polling stations. So how do they explain that?
So essentially what UNITA did was it did do a parallel vote, and a civil society group also did a parallel vote, and they actually ended up coming out with similar numbers. And there's always concern during election time in Angola about the transparency of some of these institutions that are meant to be democratic and are meant to be independent. And I think it's a well-known fact in Angola, that the National Electoral Commission as well as the Constitutional Court are quite partial to the MPLA. So I think that this was always a concern already leading up to the elections and going into the elections. And now effectively on voting day, when the National Electoral Commission didn't necessarily allow access to all of the voting papers, this is what sort of raised concern. And this is what UNITA says, well, if they're prepared to publish the parallel vote that they got, and so is civil society, what is the National Electoral Commission so afraid of?
And what kind of allegations are they making? I mean, I've seen and observing some of the elections on the continent, what the opposition would complain about in certain areas that are, quote unquote, well known for obscuring electoral results would be the stuffing of ballot papers or ballot papers that are stamped or some not stamped, so that there is easy manipulation. In this case, what is civil society, what is UNITA saying happened?
Well, at this specific moment, what civil society and UNITA are saying effectively is that there's about 400,000 votes that are unaccounted for. And, this raises previous concerns that they had before voting day, which is that the voters' roll was not updated this year, and that what they're saying is that dead people have not been removed from the voters' roll. So effectively, they're drawing attention to a specific issue now, which is that a certain number of ballots cannot be accounted for, or that perhaps some of the numbers from some of the polling stations were tampered with to a moderate extent. But effectively, they're trying to draw attention to the whole issue of transparency around elections. Again, because the National Electoral Commission is known to be partial to the MPLA, already leading up to this election, there was concern, that they're not going to update the voters' roll. They're not going to take into account the fact that the MPLA does dominate, the political environment.
So what UNITA is saying is that if they don't get reprieve from the local courts, they, maintain the right to complain to the international courts to resolve this issue. Do you foresee them going this route? Are you in agreement with what is being said by UNITA?
I'm not, and that's because I'm not really sure what UNITA is saying at this point. Elections are a sovereign issue. It starts domestically and it has to end domestically. There is also no foreign power that I can foresee that would want to intervene with this. It would look very bad on them. It would result in a lot of foreign interference in Angola. So I think UNITA is saying this, because it's trying to encourage civil society. It's trying to encourage the people that it voted for that it's not easily giving up this fight. And it has definitely behaved differently than it did in the 2017 general elections, where it similarly had concerns about a lack of transparency, about the final vote count, but it didn't actually release its own parallel vote. It didn't actually show all of these ballot papers where it says, that it won in certain provinces. And this time it did start to release some of them. But in terms of going to international bodies, again, it's not an international issue. And I think the other thing that UNITA is failing to see at this point is that a lot of foreign governments, and in particular the West, they are happy for the MPLA and for Lourenço to get a second term. And this is because UNITA, it's definitely become, it's managed to do a slow modernization away from being a party of war veterans, that it used to be known as, in previous decades. But it is untested in governance. It's not entirely clear how to manage the economy, and governments and investors everywhere like certainty above all else. So again, I'm not really sure that this international route is even possible. And even if it were to be, I don't think that anyone would really want to get involved.
So what do you then foresee unfolding in the next couple of weeks and months, given the concerns that were raised and, in fact, the incidents that were recorded of restriction of civic freedoms ahead of the elections? Is the situation likely to worsen? What do you predict?
So I think effectively this situation, it'll be a little bit tense in the coming days, but I think eventually it will start to calm down. There's only so much that UNITA can do, once it's exhausted all legal avenues, which it effectively has. It might just continue to put pressure on the National Electoral Commission to show those ballot papers, alleging that the MPLA did win 51% of the vote. But the National Electoral Commission is not likely to cooperate with this at all. And then President Lourenço is due to be sworn in on the 15th of September. I don't really foresee any delay in that. I think we also have to remember that the MPLA does have quite a strong armed response. It's got the police and it's got the army out. It's a very strong warning, not to cause too much trouble.